officials have detected cases of the so-called stealth Omicron. In fact, it is common among local cases of the highly transmissible coronavirus variant. It is official. 10 names made it to the final list of presidential aspirants in the May elections. A look at the official ballot later on in the show. And fresh from his WBC featherweight victory, Filipino boxer Mark Magsayo reveals his next target opponent. Officials have detected cases of 2 of the 3 sublineages of the Omicron coronavirus variant. These include what is now known as the stealth Omicron. Carolyn Bonkin joins us live for more. Carolyn, what else do we know about this?
The Omicron subvariant BA.2, or the so-called stealth Omicron, is present in 10 regions, including the Cordillera Administrative Region, Ilocos Region, Cagayan Valley, Central Luzon, Calabarzon, Western and Central Visayas, Soc-Sargen, Barm, and Metro Manila. This is based only on the samples tested by the Philippine Genome Center. Health officials say this is the more predominant Omicron subvariant in most regions. It got the moniker stealth Omicron because it cannot be distinguished from other variants using the RT-PCR test, making it harder to track. It's already in at least 49 countries and in 17 US states. Last week, the UK classified this as variant under investigation, with initial studies showing this could spread more quickly than the original Omicron. Here at home, health officials say there is still much to be learned about this Omicron sublineage, but so far they don't see any difference in symptoms and severity of cases compared with Omicron and its other 2 subvariants.
Walang nakitang significant difference sa clinical presentation ang BA.1 at BA.2 at kinakailangan pa rin po ng masusing pag-aaral dahil limitado pa rin naman ang ating mga obserbasyon na nakukuha dito.
The other Omicron sublineage, BA.1, is more dominant globally. Here, this has been detected in 8 regions, but is commonly found in Bicol region and from the samples of returning Filipinos. Pia.
Carolyn, the Food and Drug Administration approved 2 antigen self-administered test kits from Abbott and Lab Novation Technologies. When will these be available in the market and where can they be bought?
Health officials say this will be available in FDA-licensed drugstores, but there's no word yet on when will this be out in the market and how much is the suggested retail price. But what we do know is the health department is going to issue a new set of guidelines on this self-administered antigen test kits soon. Health officials have been asking the public to please use this test wisely, use the proper timing based on their recommendation. It is most accurate when used among symptomatic individuals. Back to you.
Carolyn Bonkin there reporting. The country listing over 17,600 new COVID-19 cases, the first time the daily tally falls below 20,000 since January 7. Health Secretary Francisco Duque says the country is now a notch lower at high risk from a critical risk classification for COVID-19. Duque notes there were some improvements, particularly in Metro Manila, that accounts for the most number of cases. He explains the region's 2-week growth rate went down to 65% from a record more than 7 times high. Healthcare utilization rate also declining, now tagged as low risk. However, the rate of sick people per 100,000 population, or what is called the daily attack rate, is still high at 84.56%. Duque says IATF members will meet on Thursday to discuss a possible alert level downgrade based on these indicators. But while the situation in Metro Manila is improving, Duque says the Ilocos region, Cagayan Valley, and the Cordilleras are still at critical risk as their average daily attack rate and 2-week growth rate are increasing. The same goes for Central Luzon, Calabarzon, and Bicol. Also at critical risk, Western, Eastern, and Central Visayas, as well as the Davao region, Caraga, Northern Mindanao, and the Zamboanga Peninsula. Now, amid the continuing threat of COVID-19, the Manila local government cancels Chinese New Year activities in Binondo. Binondo is known as the city's Chinatown. The Lunar New Year will be celebrated on February 1st. Prohibited activities include dragon dance and fireworks displays.
Nananawagan tayo sa ating mga kababayang Filipino-Chinese because this February they will celebrate Chinese New Year. So, Executive Order number 11, an order cancelling all activities in relation to the celebration of the Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year in the entire Binondo, Chinatown area. So, this is about more or less 20 barangays.
The mayor added selling and drinking of alcoholic beverages is banned from January 31st to February 1st. Two more Filipinos who recently returned to the country allegedly violated quarantine protocols. Tristan Odalo reports authorities are now preparing charges against them.
Returning overseas Filipinos who will deliberately violate existing quarantine protocols may face tougher sanctions as the Bureau of Quarantine partners with the National Bureau of Investigation to go after them. This is in line with President Rodrigo Duterte's directives to ensure border controls and quarantine protocols are being followed. So far, 4 returning Filipinos have been identified for breaking quarantine rules. 2 are now facing charges while the BOQ is preparing to file complaints against the other 2. One of the violators allegedly faked their quarantine certificate and the other did not follow the isolation period. No other details were provided by the BOQ. The agency warns that it is strictly monitoring quarantine facilities and that the NBI will file appropriate charges against those who will disobey the rules. The Overseas Workers Welfare Administration meantime expresses doubts that overseas Filipino workers or OFWs were involved in the quarantine breach.
May violations. But what we are trying to confirm is whether or not an OFW was the one who violated. They are boarded on buses, and throughout that whole process, nandiyan ang Coast Guard, Philippine Coast Guard, and of course, dahil airport, may airport police din dyan, and PNP. They are taken to quarantine hotels. Pagdating doon, nandun na naman ang Coast Guard at ang COA house parent. So, bababa sila, check-in yan, isa-isa. O, nandiyan na rin ang hotel security, di ba? And in light of recent developments, PNP is roving naman outside.
Speaking of quarantine violations, the PNP-CIDG reports that the preliminary investigation on the case of Gwyneth Anchua, also known as Poblacion Girl, is set on February 7th and 14th at the Makati City Prosecutor's Office. The CIDG meanwhile has yet to give an update on the case of another quarantine violator, a Filipina from the United States who allegedly skipped hotel quarantine and proceeded to her condo unit and even availed of massage services. Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez says the initial immunization for children aged 5 to 11 years old kicks off in Metro Manila on February 4. Galvez says there will be 2 vaccination sites per city, and these will be expanded to other regions after a week. He adds the first batch of supply is expected to arrive next week. Currently, Pfizer is the only vaccine brand given emergency use authorization for pediatric use.
Makaka-assure po tayo, Mr. President, sa ating mga magulang na very safe ang ating gagamitin na bakuna. Dahil ito ay mas mababa ang formulation na angkop para sa mga bata. Kaya po makita po natin sa vials may color coding, yung orange at saka po yung purple. Yung orange po para po sa 5 to 11 years old.
The government aims to inoculate about 14.7 million children belonging to the 5 to 11 age group. The government wants to put up more vaccination sites in transport hubs, including train stations here in Metro Manila. These are the Cubao, Shaw Boulevard, Boni, and Ayala stops of the MRT3, and some stations of the LRT2 as well. But the plan is still set for the Health Department's approval.
We're looking into establishing vaccinations in the ports, in the airport. If you remember before, we had one in Terminal 4. Then the MRT has identified about 4 stations already where we are looking at having them the vaccination sites located. For the road sector, we are looking at the other integrated terminal exchanges.
The government kicked off a 5-day inoculation drive at the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange on Monday. First and second doses, as well as booster shots, are available on this site. Now, members of the vaccine experts panel say the Russian-made single-dose Sputnik Light vaccine is a good candidate for a booster shot. They cited studies in other countries showing it produces good immune response and remains effective against the Omicron variant.
It would actually enhance the immune response in those who were previously vaccinated, and in fact, those the higher pa ang response in those who were also previously infected.
Based on one of the studies that we reviewed, actually, the administration of Sputnik Light as a revaccination to among individuals who were already vaccinated with Sputnik V showed actually they elicited neutralizing antibodies to Omicron variant. Although there is a decrease in the neutralizing antibody level.
Sputnik Light has the same component as the first shot of the 2-dose Sputnik V. Headlines overseas: a ray of hope in the global health crisis. The World Health Organization forecasts the emergency phase of the pandemic could end this year, citing developments in Europe. The agency says the Omicron variant offers hopes of stabilization and normalization, but still warns the pandemic is not yet over.
There are three things coming together in the European region. The first one is that once that the Omicron wave will subside, there will be a large capital of immunity, be it thanks to the vaccine or due to infection. The second is that winter seasonality will have a pause. And the third one is that we know that the Omicron variant is milder in the boosted individual, which means that for some weeks or months, there will be tranquility and the governments and the people can prepare to get out of the acute phase.
Health experts in the United States also cautioning about becoming complacent. While Omicron appears to be not as deadly as the Delta variant, they warn it should not be underestimated. CNN's Maddie Gaither has more in tonight's Health Minute.
Across the U.S., it spread like wildfire.
The stunning thing about Omicron is how remarkably infectious it is. I've been doing infectious disease control for 30 years, and with the possible exception of measles, it is the most infectious virus I've seen.
In less than 2 months, Omicron has packed a punch on the U.S., setting records after accounting for nearly all new COVID cases, pushing Delta into the background. While cases may fall as quickly as they rose, health experts say don't count the variant out just yet.
The biggest risk is that the fact that we are all so very tired of COVID will lead to us letting down our guard, and if another variant comes, we won't respond effectively.
Former CDC Director Dr. Tom Frieden says for people who are vaccinated and boosted, which is now about a quarter of the U.S. population, COVID-19 caused by Omicron may be similar in severity to the flu in many respects, or they may have no symptoms at all. The concern comes with those who aren't vaccinated.
The virus is adapting. As long as we adapt, we can move forward. If we don't adapt to the virus, it's going to continue to get ahead of us, because no one, and I want to emphasize this, no one can predict with accuracy what's coming after Omicron.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
While the U.S. is still not in the clear, the nation's top doctor says it is now going in the right direction in curbing Omicron, and the surge may even peak next month. Americans have begun receiving free rapid COVID-19 tests and N95 masks, government efforts to further bring down infections. Up ahead, what will the ballots for the 2022 polls look like, and who does Pinoy boxing champion Mark Magsayo want to fight next? Find out when we return.
sa mga labas nga mga balita. Paturagas! Paturagas! Mga balitang gikan sa lokal, regional ug nasyonal nga mga tinubdan. Paturagas! Bisgot sa bisan unsang hinisgutanan nga may kalabigitan sa katawhan. Paturagas! Inyong mabati din hilamang sa RPN DXKD Dipulo 1053 sa dial sa inyong mga radyo. Ang tulmanong Paturagas
inyong mabati matag alas 8 ngadto na sa alas 9 sa buntag,
Lunes hangtod Biyernes. DXKD Dipulo Radio Ronda.
Secretary of National Defense sa kasaysayan ng bansa. Naging chairman ng NDCC, malaki ang maitutulong ni Gibo para maibalik ang mga trabaho at mapalakas ang ekonomiya. Gibo Teodoro, galing at talino para sa bagong Pilipinas.
Welcome back to Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. Exactly 2 weeks from now, the campaign period officially kicks off. It will be a 10-way battle for the presidency. Melissa Lopez shows us the ballots where Filipinos will put the vote come May 9th.
From 97 presidential aspirants, only 10 names made it to the May 2022 official ballot. The country's over 67 million voters will choose who among these contenders will lead the nation for the next 6 years. Former Palace spokesman Ernie Abella, Labor leader Leody de Guzman, Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, former Defense Chief Norberto Gonzales, Senator Ping Lacson, businessman Faisal Mangondato, former Senator Bongbong Marcos, Dr. Lawyer Jose Montemayor, Senator Manny Pacquiao, and Vice President Leni Robredo. Marcos's name is printed on the ballot as legal challenges blocking his presidential bid remain unresolved. If he ends up being disqualified, votes garnered by Marcos will be credited instead to his substitute, someone with the same surname and comes from the same political party. 9 are vying for the vice presidency, while 64 will compete for 12 Senate seats, a mix of re-electionists, former cabinet officials, and political newbies. With the power struggle within PDP Laban left unresolved, COMELEC allowed 8 senatorial bets from both Pacquiao and Cusi factions to carry the ruling party's name on the ballot. Ballot printing started January 20th. The poll body excluded the names of aspirants Wilson Ahmad and Norman Marquez, even if they belatedly secured relief from the Supreme Court after being struck off as nuisance candidates. The first page also carries the names of local candidates, from governor, congressman, down to councilors per municipality. Ballots for the Bangsamoro region are up to 30 inches long and also carry Arabic instructions for locals. Voters are reminded to flip the ballot and vote for one of the 177 party list groups. A voter must shade the circle beside their preferred candidates using COMELEC's provided marker. Except for senators, they should only shade one name per position or else their vote will not be counted. Melissa Lopez, CNN Philippines.
The COMELEC signs a memorandum of agreement with the Department of Education and the Department of Science and Technology to prepare for the May elections. Under the agreement signed today, teachers will be trained to serve as members of the boards of election inspectors. They will undergo learning sessions and exams on how to operate vote counting machines. An update on some presidential aspirants. Former Senator Bongbong Marcos insisting he would rather talk about his plans for the country than dwell on his family's supposed crimes and issues from decades ago. He also says he has not thought about abolishing the Presidential Commission on Good Government, the agency tasked to look into his family's alleged ill-gotten wealth. PCGG says it is in the process of chasing after 125 billion pesos more of Marcos's assets. Senator Ping Lacson says while he's not keen on supporting rape-related abortion, the issue should be discussed and studied well. Lacson believes the government must intervene in rape-related pregnancies by taking care of the mother and child physically, emotionally, and mentally. He adds the mother should be able to decide whether to keep the baby or not. Senator Manny Pacquiao says he asked his brother Sarangani Representative Ruel Pacquiao to personally explain Lakas CMD's press release that claimed Ruel and other Sarangani officials are backing the vice presidential bid of Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte. And the COMELEC says its law department is looking into Vice President Leni Robredo's request to allow her office's COVID-19 response initiatives to continue even during the campaign season. COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez says the law department will evaluate whether Robredo's projects fulfill a humanitarian need. As he notes, disaster relief efforts were exempted before. President Duterte vows to reveal the supposed faults of most presidential aspirants once the 2022 elections draw near. Mr. Duterte claims all but one of his potential successors have issues that the public should know about.
Alam nilang tinutukoy ko sila. Meron dyan, Jose, talagang hindi pwede maging presidente. Meron naman dyan ng presidente pero masyadong corrupt. Kala lang kasi ng mga tao malinis pero yung mga nag-transact sa business sa kanya, official business, pati yung mga Chinese nagreklamo na masyadong corrupt daw. Sabi ko, ang magawa ko is to charge him for corruption. Pero naman dito na hopelessly, I think, hindi dapat magpresidente. Medyo kulang talaga. Kulang. Everyday may sasabihin siya na mali.
Meanwhile, here's what the president had to say about another unnamed aspirant.
Observation, makita mo parang tao nakainom, malaman mo na medyo sumobra siya sa limit ng botilya na kaya niya. Tapos mag-away, tapos magtapang, magsalita, masakit. Kala mo may utang, kala niya may utang yung tao sa kanya. Ganun yan eh.
Presidential hopeful Manila Mayor Isko Moreno says Mr. Duterte has the right as a voter to expose those corrupt and unfit aspirants. But for Labor leader Caliodi de Guzman, the chief executive is only trying to stay relevant. We'll take a quick break, and when we return, we find out who world boxing champion Mark Magsayo hopes to fight next in the ring. And this unique Indian wedding takes guests to the metaverse. You're watching CNN Philippines.
Radio Philippines Network. DXTD, Dipolo, Radyo Ronda. DXTD, Dipolo, Radyo Ronda. Laban, hinebra tayo. At sa pag-ahon, hinebra tayo. Sa huling patak ng bagong tapang. Pagsubok mo ay malalampasan. Sasama-samang huling patak. Tumitindi ang bagong tapang.
Lalaban
Hanggang sa huling patak. Para sa pangarap, para sa pamilya.
para sa bayan.
Ibinigay
Hanggang sa huling patak para sa One Never Nation.
Philippines WBC featherweight champion Mark Magsayo has revealed who he wants to face next in the ring. The Pinoy boxer told CNN Philippine Sports Desk he's eyeing Leo Santa Cruz in his first title defense because of the Mexican fighter's strength. Magsayo also gave a message to all athletes striving hard to win a world title, just like he did.
Maganda rin kalapanin ninyo, malakas din yun. Lahat ng mga boksingero na pangarap maging world champion, huwag kayong titigil sa pangarap na yun. Aim high palagi, laging training dedication para matupad ang pangarap.
Magsayo won the WBC featherweight belt on Sunday, cutting off what could have been Gary Russell Jr.'s sixth successful title defense. And before we go, this Indian couple booked a one-of-a-kind venue for their wedding reception, the Metaverse. 2,000 people are invited to their Harry Potter-themed virtual celebration next month, a big leap from the limit of 100 guests in weddings in their state because of the pandemic. The digital event, dubbed as India's first Metaverse event, costs about $2,000 or over 100,000 pesos to design. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. and on Politics as usual at 8:30. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
Mas pinalawak, mas pinalakas. RPN sa iba't ibang mga lalawigan. DZRL Bataan, DZBS Baguio, DZKI Iriga, DYKB Bacolod, DYKC Cebu, DXKS Surigao, DXKD Dipolo, DXKO Cagayan de Oro, DXKT Davao, DXKP Pagadian, DXXX Zamboanga, DXDX General Santos.
RPN Radio Philippines Network, DXKD Dipolo Radio Ronda, member kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Sorsogon's governor wants to return to the Senate. Francis Cheese Escudero wants to strengthen local government units, especially during this health crisis. Joining us now for an up-close conversation is Governor Cheese. Cheese, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, you have been governor of Sorsogon for 3 years now. Why not have another 3 years to continue the programs and initiatives that you already started in 2019?
First of all, Rico, to you and to all of our televiewers, a pleasant evening. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. I've only been in the provincial capital for less than 3 years, a little over 2 years, Rico. For one simple reason, whatever it is I do great in my province, it will never be enough to help uplift our entire province and our people without the country being uplifted as well. Sa laki ng problema ang dinulot ng pandemyang ito sa ating bansa at sa ating ekonomiya, kailangan ng tulong ng bawat isa at nais kong i-alok yung tulong na yun. Ano mang nalalaman, karanasan, eksperyensya, galing o talino, meron man ako, nais kong ialay dahil ang aming lalawigan ng Sorsogon. Hindi aangat ng kami lang. Kailangan umangat ang buong bansa para umangat din kami. Yun ang aking paniniwala, kaya ako yung tumatakbo muli o inaalay muli. O muling nilalagay ang pangalan ko sa balota para isa sa pagpilian ng ating mga kababayan na maging miyembro ng Senado.
And you were a member of the Senate, Cheese, from 2007 to 2019. And if you win in May of 2022, you want to push for legislation to strengthen and empower local government units. How do you plan to do this, Cheese?
There are many regulations, issuances, not really laws, which restrict the hands of local government units. For example, my budget in the province needs to be approved by the DBM. Any position I create needs to be approved by the DILG and the Civil Service Commission. Asan yung devolution? Nasaan yung kalayaan ng LG magpasya para sa sarili niya at gastusin yung sarili niyang era? Now, if we're talking about funds emanating from the national government, like a subsidy, like an aid, then they can impose a menu. They can say where we can spend it on. However, if we're speaking of the internal revenue allotment or the locally generated revenues of LGUs, I think LGUs should be given a wider latitude, if not total freedom, to decide what to do with that money. Because by far, They know what their constituents need compared to what other officials in the national government are only limited to staying in their respective offices in Manila and not really knowing the true problems and situation in the various parts of our country. Add to that, Rico, that I've seen many best practices in so many LGUs that will by far outweigh and are by far more efficient and successful compared to what the national government is imposing on us, which we should follow. I think one of the solutions to this pandemic is to allow local government units to decide based on the idiosyncrasies of their respective local areas what needs to be done to address this pandemic right now.
And do you think LGUs should be able to procure their own vaccines?
Well, for those who can, our province cannot afford to do that, Rico, but there are many provinces who can afford to do it, and why not? In fact, I'm waiting for the time where you can buy a vaccine in a drugstore near your house. Right. Hopefully that time will not be too far from coming. LGUs, private companies, it took a while before government was even able to allow private companies to buy using their own money and even ask the 50% be donated. Probably the private sector may have been more efficient in terms of procuring and even rolling out the vaccines that they themselves will be purchasing.
And Chase, you also want to solve the economic and public health problems of the country. How do you plan to fight this pandemic through legislation?
The most important piece of legislation Congress, any member of Congress, the House or the Senate should pass would be the Yearly General Appropriations Act. That is the most important law that they will pass, and that's an instrument by which government acts and makes other people react. It dictates whether our economy will indeed grind or grind slowly or grind to a halt. I have been fortunate to have been the finance chairman of the committee in the Senate, which handles the national budget. And indeed, it is a very important piece of legislation that can be used to either bring back the economy to where it was or make it slump even further, or on the other hand, help us overcome this health crisis or help us remain in the situation that we are in up to today after more than 1.5 years.
And of course, we all know, Chase, millions of our kababayans are still out of jobs. The economy is weak and faces a long road towards a recovery. If you become senator once again, how will you try to jumpstart the economy and create jobs through legislation?
The national budget is the instrument that can create jobs, Rico. Number one, by way of expenditure, they can create jobs, however temporary it may be. But if government spends enough, it will stimulate the private sector to engage in spending as well, which will provide jobs as well. Number two, the government must be able to balance. It is a difficult balancing act, but they must be able to balance on the one hand, the safety and health of our people, and on the other hand, the revival of our economy, meaning to say how to bring back jobs, how to reopen businesses that were closed, in order to pave the way for not only the new normal, but a normal life for everyone. Hopefully, Rico, so far the researches on a cure has been very positive, and by middle of next year, we hope that indeed their projections are correct, that a cure will be available, in which case it will be like your other diseases, hypertension, then you eat lechon, Rico, and then drink your pill. Diabetes, then eat your cake and ice cream, and then drink your pill. Same is true here. Instead of vaccinating 110 million Filipinos, we would only be providing medicine to those who would get sick, which is about 2% of our population.
But of course, Chase, we also have to make sure that the budget that is appropriated to the various government agencies has to be used properly, no? No graft and corruption. Everyone has to be held accountable, and there has to be transparency.
Let's start, Rico, with use. Let's start with use. There are many agencies whose absorptive capacity is very low. Congress allocated them a huge amount of money, but they were not able to spend it, or they did not spend it, either for some one or another bureaucratic reason or red tape reason. Number two would be, as you said, it should be spent properly. That's why, Rico, I am totally against the reason being used by government. I'm citing NDA or a non-disclosure agreement as a reason not to disclose at how much did we buy the vaccines that we procured. Because to my knowledge, Rico, government borrowed over 300 billion to procure vaccines. And the price of vaccines are in the website. The prices of vaccines are in the website of the WHO. In other countries, they publish it in newspapers and come out as news articles. But here in our country, and I believe in about 3 other countries, they're using the NDA as an excuse not to be transparent with respect to how government money, public money was spent, specifically in buying the vaccines.
And Chase, let's talk about this provision of substitution in the Omnibus Election Code. And some critics are saying candidate substitution by political parties has been abused. What should be done by Congress in 2022?
Historically, Rico, that was not a problem before, because the last day of filing has always been followed by the first day of campaigning the day after. But since we automated our elections, filing had to be made earlier so that COMELEC can still print the ballots and put the names of all the candidates in the ballot. It opened up the floodgates for a period of substitution. 2 things can be done, Rico. 1, do not allow voluntary substitution after the last day of filing. In other words, there can be substitution, but it should be involuntary, meaning if the candidate becomes incapacitated or decides to withdraw or is killed or dies. But voluntary substitution and voluntary withdrawal may be prohibited or excluded from the law to avoid situations where we see that the last day of filing is being there's a mockery with respect to the period for filing certificates of candidacy. They simply file without even being serious in filing, simply to fill in the gap or warm the chair for someone else. In a way, it's a circumvention of the provisions of the law providing for a period for filing of certificates of candidacy.
And Chase, a lot of issues to talk about, but let's jump to you running for senator, and you're a guest candidate on the rosters of several presidential aspirants, VP Leni Robredo, Senator Ping Lacson, Manny Pacquiao, to name a few. Does it help your cause to be a guest candidate of many lineups instead of just one party, one group?
Rico, sino mang kandidato na kulang ang makinarya, kulang ang pera na maglunsad ng kampanya sa buong bansa, malaking bagay na maisali ka, maampon ka, ma-adapt ka, at may mag-alok ng tulong sa'yo. Kahit sino siguro tumatakbo na may nag-alok ng tulong, hindi naman tatanggihan yun ng sino mang kumakandidato. Basta't walang hinihiling na kapalit, na prinsipyo o paniniwala mo. But Rico, on the other hand, I also see it as a positive step. A positive step because if presidential candidates who are competing right now can agree and can find common ground with 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 candidates, or several local candidates, then probably there's also a possibility that after the elections, whoever wins, they can also find common ground and come to agreement with respect to fighting for the interests of over 110 million Filipinos.
I have to ask you this question, Cheese, because your late father was a part of the Marcos administration. If Bongbong Marcos asks you to be a guest candidate in his senatorial slate, will you agree?
First of all, Rico, like I said, sino man mag-aalok ng tulong na walang hinihiling na kapalit, walang rason para sino man tumanggi. But if the premise is, I will automatically agree because my father served as minister of former President Marcos, I hope to remind our televiewers too that I also ran against Bongbong in the 2016 elections for vice president. So that would have nothing to do with it. The only reason, if at all, would be the fact that I am a nobody to refuse or say no to someone offering help and who is not asking for anything in return.
All right, we will continue our up-close conversation with Governor Chis Escudero after this short break. Keep it right here on CNN Philippines. News you can use, news you can trust.
Network, DXKD, Dipolo, Radyo, Ronda.
DXKD, Ronda, Balita. Mga balitang may kamatuuran, way gidapigan o hilisgutanan sa katawhan. DXKD Ronda Balita. Mga labas nga mga balita gikan sa sinaligang mga tinubdan. Balitang hinimo sa lawak balitaanan. Diin inyong madungog ang mga balitang lokal, regional, national o international o uban pang may kalabutan sa atong katilingban. Gihatod kaninyo live gikan sa RPN DXKD Radio Ronda Broadcast Center. DXKD Ronda Balita. Inyong madungog matag adlang Lunes hangtod Biyernes alas 12 hangtod sa alas 2 sa kahaponon ug makita usab sa RPN DXKD Dipolog Facebook page, YouTube ug sa Twitter. DXKD Ronda Balita.
DXKD Dipolog Radio Ronda.
Welcome back to the final word on CNN Philippines. I'm Rico Hizon. Let's continue our discussion with Sorsogon Governor Cheese Escudero. Cheese, we have 6 questions for you, but you only have to answer them with a yes or a no, and no explanation is needed. Okay? I'm putting you on the spot. Here's the first question. Do you favor easier public access to the statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth of the President, Vice President, and the members of Congress?
Yes.
Do you support lifting foreign ownership limits in the Constitution?
No.
Do you favor the reimposition of the death penalty for drug-related crimes?
No.
Should a sitting president be allowed to run for vice president in the next election?
Yes.
Cheese?
I can't
Yes?
explain now, but yes,
No, you
because
can't
it's not
explain. So it's a
prohibited
yes.
right now.
Okay. Do you favor? You thought about that for a number of seconds there. Do you favor resuming peace talks with the communist rebels?
Yes.
And should the country be more aggressive in protecting its maritime interests in the West Philippine Sea?
Definitely. Yes.
And finally, Cheese, before we end our up-close conversation, a final message for our kababayans who are thinking right now if they should vote for you or not vote for you and return you to the Senate in the May 2022 elections.
So I can't use this to explain my yes and no answers?
No? Final message.
Sa bigat at laki ng problema ng ating bansa, bawat isa sa atin, ano man ang kakayahan, ano man ang talento, ano man ang karanasan, ano man ang galing, dapat ialay yon para sa bayan, bilang public official man o bilang pribadong mamamayan. Sa parte ko, naging buhay ko na sa matagal na panahon ng pagiging public servant. At ito ang nalalaman kong gawin at pwede kong maiambag sa ating bansa. Kaya muli ko nilagay ang pangalan ko sa balota para isa sa pagpilian ng ating mga kababayan na maging miyembro muli ng Senado para maiambag, maitulong, maialok kung ano mang nalalaman ko at pwede kong gawin, hindi lamang para sa aming lalawigan bilang gobernador ngayon, pero para sa buong bansa at sa ating mga kababayan.
Sorsogon Governor Cheese Escudero, thank you so much for joining us on The Final Word.
Maraming salamat, Rico. Thank you. Good evening.